Hey, Braveheart brothers, Richard here with Man Talk Monday. I want to talk with us a little bit about identity. I was thinking about names and how important names are. What we name a person or a thing becomes the identifier for that person and thing. And it calls to mind this story from the Old Testament of Scripture. It's in the book of Genesis in the Bible. And it's a story about a man named Jacob and his beloved wife, Rachel. I mean, the Rachel Jacob love story is like epic. And Rachel is pregnant with what will be with the child that will be Jacob's last son. Problem is, the pregnancy is very difficult, and the delivery is brutal, and Rachel dies shortly after the child is born. Tragic situation. And in fact, in her last breath, her dying words, because she's so overcome with the sadness and the pain, and the realization she's losing her life. And her final words is, she said, "I want this child to be named." It was a son, it was a boy, and I want this child to be named Ben-Oni, which in that language meant son of my sorrow, son of my suffering. So sad. But it's interesting, in the Bible account, the very next phrase in the story is right after Rachel says, "I want the child to have the name Son of Sorrow." She basically named him after what she was feeling and experiencing in the situation itself. But right after that, the phrase says, "But the father said the child's name will be Benjamin." And Benjamin in that language is translated son of my right hand. So you have this grieving husband. His beloved wife has just passed away. And yet he has the presence of mind, or I don't know, somehow he is able to muster the strength to say, "No, I'm not going to let the child be named after what just happened. I want the child to be named based on what I believe about that child." Now, in this time, and in that culture, in that era, the rule was basically that the dad got to decide the child's name. In our day and age, which I think is better, the parents together as a team determine the name. That's how it normally works. But back in the day, at this time, it was all about the dad. It was like his responsibility, and part of his role was to be the decider about what the child would be named. And Jacob stepped up, even in the midst of his own grief. He stepped up and said, "No, I'm not going to name my child after this traumatic thing that's happened to us. I'm going to name my child after what I believe about this boy." The reason I love that story is because of the truth that I know, and that we talk about a lot in the Braveheart community, that our identity shapes who we become and really shapes our life. The identity, the names, the labels, the identifiers that we embrace and accept for ourselves are going to end up dramatically influencing what our life looks like. And when I think about my own life over the years, I was given the name Richard by my parents, but I gave myself names all through the years, and other people would speak out labels or names or identifiers that I would sort of latch onto. And over the years, I became a lot of things. And in the difficulties that I experienced in my adult life, I named myself failure. I named myself divorced, addict. I never changed my driver's license still said Richard, but in my mind, in my heart, I was calling myself too late for him. I was calling myself blows all his opportunities, will never reach his potential, getting what he deserved. I just had all of these labels that I just sort of formed these things into my identity. And it was I gotta tell you, be honest, the Braveheart community, the Braveheart experience, going through the Braveheart intensive were the turning points for me about allowing myself to believe that maybe those labels and names I had accepted over the years, that's not me. These were the things that helped me. You were the men. You guys that are watching this, some of you guys were the men who really were the turnaround experience for me. And so that's why I wanted this to be our topic of discussion. And I want us to consider and think about this identity piece. I want to give you a specific example from my life of how this played out. I used to, one of the names and labels I accepted over myself, even from childhood, was the word small. Small. I've always been a smaller guy, smallest kid in the class, shortest guy on the team, whatever, skinny, all that. Even as an adult, I'm slightly below average height, all this stuff. I didn't hate being small. Sometimes I probably did. But I think as a kid, but as I grew a little bit older and I wanted to kind of impress people and I wanted to be attractive and I wanted to, I wanted the girls to think I was cool or whatever, I became super aware that I was skinny and small, and it did start to bother me. And then as an adult, I realized that the small label wasn't about stature anymore. It was about, I just really felt like I was less significant than everybody else. And then I had this experience that when I was an adult, I was a part of this ministry leadership team, right, with a church. And we went to this conference and we all were given an allowance to go buy books at this conference, continuing education type of thing. So I go to the books and I genuinely feel drawn to certain books. There's just something inside me that goes, ooh, I love this church history book right here. So I got a couple of those. I love this biography because I want to hear the story of that great faith leader from centuries ago, and then I buy this teeny little book. It's called The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer. It's literally this big, game-changing book. You need to look into that one. So anyway, I got my books. I'm so excited. I get to the end of the line and I'm with the other guys on my team, and they're carrying these big, thick theology books and, like college level textbooks is what it looked like to me. I mean, and they were just like carrying like this, and I'm sitting here with my little stack of books. And they tease me. And they say, oh, there you go. You can count on Richard, get the little stuff, the light stuff, the shallow stuff. And I try to laugh it off and blah, blah, blah. We're just kind of giving each other a hard time. But I'm like, dude, I remember that. That was like, yeah, those guys are a bigger deal than I am. Because, I just like these are the things I like. And it means that I'm not as important and as good a leader and as smart and as learned as these guys. And I'm telling you, this is how I lived for years and years and decades as an adult. And then it was in the Braveheart experience and at the Braveheart intensive that the Lord started to peel that back and say, no, Richard, you are not small. You are not small. And so part of my identity statement, that's something that you come out of the Braveheart intensive experience with. And one of the slices of my identity statement is, I am Lionheart. As Lionheart, I roam the kingdom assigned to me by the true king in search of beauty and adventure. Lionheart. So I'm talking with Michael Warden, our Braveheart leader, one time recently, last year, and I tell him that's one part of my identity statement, Lionheart. He said, unpack the Lionheart thing for me. Well, my parents used to tell me when I was a kid that they chose Richard. One of the reasons is because they love that character from Old English history, King Richard the Lionhearted. And they said, we just believed you were going to be a lion-hearted person. And so we named you that. And I said, oh, that's cool. And Michael said, oh, that's cool. And he said, but what does Lionheart really mean to you? And I said, Lionheart means I am a man of consequence. I'm not small potatoes. I'm a man that matters. And I just wanted to share that with you. That's an example of how the Braveheart community and these relationships and these experiences in the intensive itself, the Braveheart Intensive itself, made such a huge impact on me. And so I want to take a moment and just ask you to do three things in light of this conversation. First, I want you to notice what you name yourself. Notice how you talk about yourself. Notice how you think about yourself, your self-talk. Notice the names that you give yourself. Label and identify them, write them down so that you know that's how you've been calling yourself. And then after you do that, consider the names that your Creator might give you. How would He label you? How does He speak about you? And the ways you can do this, if you're a person of faith, you can go through Scripture and you can look at the ways that God speaks to His children throughout the Bible, and that's how He wants to speak to you. You could lean into the Braveheart community and the relationships and start conversations about how you see yourself and what you think your true identity is. And when you start getting real, accurate, true identity pieces, start embracing that. Embrace it by speaking that over yourself daily. Embrace it by when you commune with the Creator, when you speak to God in prayer, you call out those names and you say, this is what you have called me. And one last encouragement, go to the Braveheart Intensive. We've got one coming up in October. It's October 1 through 4, 1st through the 4th in Colorado Springs. Go to the Braveheart Intensive. Go to the Braveheart Intensive again. Might need a rehash, so go again. It's in those moments that God will speak about a number of things, and one of the key components of the intensive is the identity piece, and I think you'll find some strength there. You'll find that. I do want to just share one last thought to you. You notice I'm wearing my Braves hat, right? Love the Braves. Watching the Braves on TV recently, and they're playing in their home ballpark there in Atlanta, north of Atlanta, and it's called Truist Park. And I'm like, Truist? Okay, so that's this banking company, multi-billion-dollar company. But their logo is right there on the building. I'm like, how do you get to name a stadium after yourself, after your company? And I realized, but they paid a big price. They paid for what's called the naming rights. So that's why it's called Truist Park. And then I thought, wait a second. That's why God gets to name us. That's why our Creator gets to name us. It's because He has paid the price for the naming rights. In the New Testament of Scripture in 2 Corinthians 6, 19 and 20, it says that don't forget you're not your own. You're bought with a price. And so honor God with your life and with your body and with everything about you. God has the naming rights. Your Creator is the one who gets to name you. And one of the coolest parts of our journey will be diving into, Lord, what do you name me? And let that be your identity. So I leave you with one story from my Braveheart Intensive. There was a time where brothers were looking at each other and speaking affirmations to them. And a guy looked at me and he said, and he didn't know anything about my naming myself small and that struggle. He just looked at me and says, Richard, I want you to know you're a big deal. You're a big deal to God. And you're a big deal in this world. And I'm like, dude, that's worth the price of admission right there. This guy who's struggling with being small all my life, God speaks directly through a Braveheart brother and says, you're a big deal. And I'm telling you, if we will embrace this identity journey and this naming issue and let our Creator name us, because He's bought the naming rights anyway, if we let Him do that and we embrace it and we walk in the light of our naming, to quote Michael Warden's first book in the Pearl Song Refounding, if we'll do that, it'll be one of the most glorious things we experience in our life, in our journey on this earth. So let's do the identity thing. Hey, blessings, guys. Thanks for watching this. And like and subscribe so you can keep getting content from the Braveheart Men. Go to the braveheartmen.com website. Hit the events link and look at that that Braveheart Intensive that's coming up in October. You won't regret it. Bless you guys. Talk to you later.